If you've been following my channel, you know that back in January I had a rather disappointing experience reviewing this Chinese-made ER32 collet set. Both the chuck and the collets have quite a bit of runout, while the collets are probably beyond repair, or at least for my limited skill set. I am going to try and regrind the internal taper of the chuck so it will run through again. Hopefully I can do a good job, because then I can try out this bag full of collets Banggood sent me. I got 19 brand new ER collets here, and I'm hoping they are just as good as the ones my boy reviewed some time ago. They are packaged in the same yellow containers, so that might be a good sign. But more about these later. First I gotta do some grinding using my little pencil grinder you might have seen in a previous video. I just marked the high and low spot on the spindle and the collet chuck, trying to cancel them out against each other. And I got the chuck running within 0.02 of a millimeter. That's the best I can do. I know it isn't perfect, but I'm not expecting a perfect result. Before I start grinding the internal taper, I want to clean up this awful looking bandsaw finish first. It will also allow me to test a few grinding bits. The first grinding tool I want to try out is one of those small stones that came with the pencil grinder. But before I start, I will true it up using this diamond thingy that I normally use to true up grinding wheels. And here comes the noise. Yeah, that should probably be enough. Well, let's just continue. And that's the compressor kicking in. The sparking gets more consistent, so I think I'm almost there. Well, pretty rough. I'm not sure if I was running the pencil grinder at full speed. Definitely not, because it sounds different. Seem to be some chunks missing from the stone. Maybe I was feeding it in too fast. Let's try a different tool. Let's see what this cutoff disc can do. It has a lot more surface speed, so I expect a better result. Still not perfect. I was going to try one of those sanding paper drums that sit on a expanding rubber arbor, but none of the arbors fit inside this 3mm collet here. Just like the sandpaper drums, I don't think I can through this thing up. So this is probably not the best option I have, but I'm gonna try it anyway. No sparks. That's just as bad as the grinding stone. It might even be worse. I found some grinding stones in my box with Dremel bits, but none of these fit inside the arbor here. So I'm going to wear down this cut-off disc till it fits inside the taper here, and try using this. Let's see if I can line up the top slide with the internal taper. The needle is jumping quite a bit. Looks like the inside of that taper is still pretty rough. After I cleaned the taper, the needle stopped jumping around. It turns out there was quite a bit of grinding dust in there. I think this is about the best I can do. The opening here should be 32 millimeters. Because it takes ER32 collets, but it's closer to 31 millimeters, and that's why the collets were sticking out pretty far, and only half of the thread was used by the collet nut. Since this is a lot of material to remove, I've decided to try and bore it out with a carbide insert. Now, carbide should usually beat hardened steel. Let's find out if that's also true in my case. Hopefully it is. I think it cuts just fine. Maybe add a little lubricant. That is better than I expected. I did some light sanding on the taper, and the finish feels already better than it was, and it seems to run reasonably true. The needle jumps a little bit, but that's probably because of the surface finish. I also tested the taper deeper inside here, and I'm getting the same result. I'm not going to take another cut with the boring bar because I already took out too much material. It's very hard to measure this opening directly, especially with a camera in front of your face. But with the help of a collet, I'll keep this in place with the boring bar. I can measure this using a bit of trigonometry. So that's 32.67, and I've already calculated that I need to subtract a little under 0.5 millimeter. So I already overshot my mark with a 1/10 of a millimeter. I'm not going to bore you with the trigonometry details. It might bring back bad memories from your school days. Besides, there are online calculators for this sort of thing now. Something I wish I had back in the day. I think I should do some testing before I decide that I'm going to continue grinding this collet chalk. Maybe the grinding isn't even needed. This is the 16mm collet out of that new Banggood collet set. I think that's about 4/100th of a millimeter runout. Not great, but not nearly as bad as the previous set. Since the taper is running through, I should be able to repeat this measurement when I reposition the collet. So let's try that. Oh, as expected, about the same amount of runout. Let's try that again. And this is the third test after repositioning the collet and the test piece. It's even less runout, which worries me a bit, because I would have preferred the same consistent reading. Test 4. Test 5. Test 6. I've lost count of the number of tests I did so far, but I'm not getting back those low runout numbers I had before. I've cleaned things twice now. I'm using a little WD-40 to make things slightly easier. And I also changed the collet nut, but I'm consistently getting, well, at least 1/1200th of a millimeter runout. I don't know how I managed to get those low runout numbers, but I suspect the problem is with the collet. Let's have a closer look at this 16mm collet. That is actually a bit magnetic. Now there are no slitting saw chips inside these slits, but there is a bit of grinding dust in there because of the magnetism. Just like the other collet set, this one is also a bit marked, or has some dents, or is nicked by the slitting saw at some places. But the biggest problem might be the edge here. It hasn't been properly chamfered. It catches your nail. I removed that burr using the Dremel and one of those sanding drums, but now because of the magnetism it's hard to remove the grinding dust. I've done 3, well including this one, 4 more tests, and I'm getting very inconsistent results. At one point I had 600ths run out, I had 1200ths, almost 2000ths, and this is about 1700ths. Time for a little unboxing. They are certainly packaged nice and well oiled. There's one of those nicks. There's a few more here. I'll hold it against the light to check for chips. No chips, looks very clean, not magnetic. Let's try it out. That sounds and feels rough, and it seems to be getting stuck in the rear. Oh, there it is. Here we go. That's 400ths of a millimeter. That's pretty good for a Banggood collet. Let's reposition things and try again. Yeah, just under 500th. And that's more or less the same result. And again, almost the same, about 500th of a millimeter. Very consistent. I like it. Let's test the 5mm collet as well. You know, last time the 5mm collet turned out to be 5.5mm. What's the chance of that happening again? It's been clear. And there. The bore on most of these collets is rougher than I would have liked them to be. I just held the collet against the light and there's no sign of slitting saw chips. Let's try it out. Now check this out. It actually is bigger than 5mm. I wasn't expecting that. That's well, I would say it's pretty funny, but it's pretty sad. So the runout is about 0.07 of a millimeter, and you can actually see the test piece wobbling up and down. I'll reposition it and do another test. Test number 2, and that's a bit more than 0.05 of a millimeter runout, but it does seems to be running a lot better. That's about the same. I really hate these inconsistent results. And this is the third test. And we're back to a whole lot of runout. I've tested enough collets to tell you without a doubt that this set is wonderful when compared to the other set I tested earlier this year. Now I'm not going to look at the other ones. I will leave them well preserved in their little yellow coffins. It's too bad, because now I still don't have a decent collet set. Maybe I should have asked for an ER25 set, just like my boy. His ones were really great. I've been debating if I should still grind the collet shock taper. I am a bit worried that the angle on the taper might be slightly off. It could be, if the original taper I referenced against was at an angle inside the collet shock. But without a known good reference, I see no reason for any more grinding, other than the fact that you guys like the sound so much. So here we go. I'm not getting the result I wanted. I got a feeling that sometimes the disc is digging into the metal. Maybe it's the oil that comes out of the grinder. I don't think you're supposed to lubricate grinding jobs, but it's hard to avoid oil getting in here without sticking the tool out much further, which I don't think is a good idea with a tin arbor like this one. Anyway, it doesn't really matter as long as I don't have a set of decent collets. There's one more thing I need to do before I end this video, and that's to mark the position of the chuck in relation to the spindle. It probably doesn't matter that much, but it will save some time when I continue working on this chuck in the future. I'm not going to mark the spindle, so I will use this as a reference point. Well, I'll improve that later. Anyway, that's it for me. Now I'm going to talk with my banker and see if I can finance some decent collets. To be continued.